on things eternal. May our hopes be builded through future generations. Let our hearts meditate understanding, our eyes shine with the light of knowledge, our lips indite wisdom, and our feet hasten to do the will of God, the Ancient of Days.
Dear friends, representatives of so many Jewish organizations assembled here from across the United States, my dear Jewish brothers and sisters, I am grateful to you for your kind words of greeting. I am indeed pleased to be with you, especially at this time when the United States tour of the Vatican Judaica collection begins. A wonderful material, including illuminated Bibles and prayer books, demonstrates but a small part of the immense spiritual resources of Jewish tradition across the centuries and up to the present time. Spiritual resources often used in fruitful cooperation with Christian artists. It is fitting at the beginning of our meeting to emphasize our faith in the one God who chose Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and made with them a covenant of eternal love which was never revoked. It was rather confirmed by the gift of the Torah to Moses, opened by the prophets to the hope of eternal redemption and to the universal commitment for justice and peace. The Jewish people, the Church, and all believers in the merciful God, who is invoked in the Jewish prayers as Avcha Rachamim, can find in this fundamental covenant with the patriarchs a very substantial starting point for our dialogue and our common witness in the world. It is also fitting to recall God's promise to Abraham and the spiritual fraternity which it established. In your descendants, all the nations shall find blessing. All this because you obeyed my command. This spiritual fraternity linked to obedience to God requires a great mutual respect in humility and confidence. An objective consideration of our relations during the centuries must take into account this great need. It is indeed worthy of note that the United States was founded by people who came to these shores often as religious refugees. They aspired to being treated justly and to being accorded hospitality according to the Word of God, as we read in Leviticus. You shall treat the land who resides with you no differently than the natives born among you. Have the same love for him as for yourself. For you too were once aliens in the land of Egypt. I, the Lord, am your God. Among these millions of immigrants, there was a large number of Catholics and Jews. The same basic religious principles of freedom and justice, of equality and moral solidarity, affirmed in the Torah as well as in the Gospel, were in fact reflected in the high human ideals and in the protection of universal rights found in the United States. These, in turn, exercised a strong positive influence on the history of Europe and other parts of the world. But the path of the immigrants in their new land were not always easy. Sadly enough, prejudice and discrimination were also known in the New World as well as in the Old. Nevertheless, together, Jews and Catholics have contributed to the success of the American experiment in religious freedom. And in this unique context have given to the world a vigorous form of interreligious dialogue between our two ancient traditions. For those engaged in this dialogue, so important to the Church and to the Jewish people, I pray, may God bless you and make you strong for His service. At the same time, our common heritage, task and hope do not eliminate our distinctive identities. Because of her specific Christian witness, the Church must preach Jesus Christ to the world. In so doing, we proclaim that Christ is our peace. As the Apostle Paul said, all this is from God, who through Christ reconciled us to Himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. At the same time, we recognize and appreciate the spiritual treasures of the Jewish people and their religious witness to God. A fraternal theological dialogue will try to understand, in the light of the mystery of redemption, how differences in faith should not cause enmity, but open up the way of reconciliation, so that in the end, God may be all in all. In this regard, I'm pleased that the National Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Synagogue Council of America are initiating a consultation between Jewish leaders and bishops, which should carry forward a dialogue on issues of the greatest interest to the two faith communities. Considering history in the light of the principles of faith in God, we must also reflect on the catastrophic event of the Shoah, that ruthless and inhuman attempt to exterminate the Jewish people in Europe, an attempt that resulted in millions of victims, including women and children, the elderly and the sick, exterminated only because they were Jews. Considering this mystery of the suffering of Israel's children, their witness of hope, of faith, and of humanity under dehumanizing outrages, the Church experiences ever more deeply her common bonds with the Jewish people and with their treasure of spiritual riches in the past and in the present. It is also fitting to recall the strong and unequivocal efforts of the popes against anti-Semitism and Nazism at the height of the persecution against the Jews. Back in 1938, Pius XI declared that anti-Semitism cannot be admitted, and he declared the total opposition between Christianity and Nazism by stating that the Nazi cross is an enemy of the cross of Christ. And I am convinced that history will reveal ever more clearly and convincingly how deeply Pius XII felt the tragedy of the Jewish people, and how hard and effectively he worked to assist them during the Second World War. Speaking in the name of humanity and Christian principles, the Bishops' Conference of the United States denounced the atrocities with a clear statement. Since the murderous assault on Poland, utterly devoid of every semblance of humanity, there has been a premeditated and systematic extermination of the people of this nation. The same satanic technique is being applied to many other peoples. We feel a deep sense of revulsion against the cruel indignities heaped upon the Jews in conquered countries and upon defenseless peoples not of our faith. We also remember many others who, at the risk of their own lives, helped persecuted Jews and are honored by the Jews with the title of Tzaddik and Mot Haolam, righteous of the nations. The terrible tragedy of your people has led many Jewish thinkers to reflect on the human condition with acute insights. Their vision of man and the roots of this vision in the teaching of the Bible, which we share in our common heritage of the Hebrew Scriptures, offer Jewish and Catholic scholars much useful material for reflection and dialogue. And I am thinking here above all on the contribution of Martin Buber and also of Emmanuel Levinas. In order to understand even more deeply the meaning of the Shoah and the historical roots of anti-Semitism that are related to it, joint collaboration and studies by Catholics and Jews on the Shoah should be continued. Such studies have already taken place through many conferences in your country, such as the National Workshop of Christian-Jewish Relations. The religious and historical implications of the Shoah for Christians and Jews will now be taken up formally by the International Catholic Jewish Liaison Committee, meeting later this year in the United States for the first time. And as was affirmed in the important and very cordial meeting I had with Jewish leaders in Castel Gandolfo on September the 1st, a Catholic document on the Shoah and anti-Semitism will be forthcoming, resulting from such serious studies. Similarly, it is to be hoped that common educational programs in our historical and religious relations, which are well developed in your country, will truly promote mutual respect and teach future generations about the Holocaust, so that never again will such a horror be possible. Never again. When meeting the leaders of the Polish Jewish community in Warsaw in June of this year, I underscored the fact that through the terrible experience of the Shoah, your people have become a loud warning voice for all the humanity, for all nations, for all the powers of this world, of every system and every individual, a saving warning. It is also desirable that in every diocese Catholics should implement, under the direction of the bishops, the statement of the Second Vatican Council and the subsequent instructions issued by the Holy See regarding the correct way to preach and teach about Jews and Judaism. I know that a great many efforts in this direction have already been made by Catholics, and I wish to express my gratitude to all those who have worked so diligently for this aim. Necessary for any sincere dialogue is the intention of each partner to allow others to define themselves in the light of their own religious experience. In fidelity to this affirmation, Catholics recognize among the elements of the Jewish experience that Jews have a religious attachment to the land, which finds its roots in biblical tradition. After tragic extermination of the Shoah, the Jewish people began a new period in their history. They have a right to a homeland as does any civil nation according to international law. For the Jewish people who live in the state of Israel and who preserve in that land such precious testimonies to their history and their faith, we must ask for the desired security and the due tranquility that is the prerogative of every nation and condition of life and of progress for every society. It was the letter Redemptionis Annum, 1984. What has been said about the right to a homeland also applies to the Palestinian people, so many of whom remains homeless and refugees. While all concerned must honestly reflect on the past, Muslims no less than Jews and Christians, it is time to forge those solutions which will lead to a just, complete and lasting peace in that area. For this peace I earnestly pray. Finally, as I thank you once again for the warmth of your greeting to me, I give praise and thanks to the Lord for this fraternal meeting, for the gift of dialogue between our peoples, and for the new and deeper understanding between us. As our long relationship moves toward its third millennium, it is our great privilege in this generation to be witnesses to this progress. It is my sincere hope that as partners in dialogue, as fellow believers in the God who revealed himself, as children of Abraham, we will strive to render a common service to humanity, which is so much needed in this our day. We are called to collaborate in service and to unite in a common cause wherever a brother or sister is unattended, forgotten, neglected, or suffering in any way. Wherever human rights are endangered or human dignity offended, wherever the rights of God are violated or ignored. With the psalmist, I know, repeat, I will hear that God proclaims, the Lord, for he proclaims peace to his people and to his faithful ones and to those who put in him their hope. To all of you, dear friends, dear brothers and sisters, to all of you, dear Jewish people of America, with great hope, I wish you the peace of the Lord. Shalom, shalom. God bless you on this Sabbath and in this year. Sabbath shalom. Shana Tova ve'Chatima Tova. I don't know if my pronunciation of the
It is the authority with which you speak and the integrity and authenticity which carries all convictions.
And of course, it appears, judging by all of the applause, that the Pope's speech is very well received. Of course, he concluded it with a Jewish prayer, speaking in Hebrew, wishing the Jews well. Also, you heard an earlier applause during the Pope's speech, which is something interesting to point out. It was while the Pope was talking about the Holocaust, and he ended by saying, "Never again, never again," and applause erupted in the audience, and that is something that is just central to all Jewish teaching and education, that they should teach to their children to never forget what happened during the Holocaust, because some people would wish that it were forgotten, or would tell people that it never happened. And so never forget is a central theme in the Jewish religion, and that the Pope said never forget to his Jewish audience was very well received.
Jerry, I noticed that particular interruption, and I guess that does probably come very stridently and clearly to the question of are we particularly going to recognize the unique Jewish experience in the Holocaust? And I hope at least that question is settled. It's very clear.
Yeah, I think, as you pointed out earlier, that the Pope certainly is not going to apologize for the Waldheim visit. At the very most, what he'll do is condemn the Holocaust, and he certainly did that in no uncertain words today, and he's done it before as well.
Jerry, as you know, the problem with the meeting with Waldheim has been sort of the sore point that has been seen most visibly this year. But also there is the very basic problem of the recognition of Israel. Do you feel that any progress was made in that standoff today?
It's interesting that you point that out, Ian. I was just going to mention something about that. Of course, you know, that is the deepest wish of Jews worldwide, that the Vatican establish diplomatic relations with Israel. No one expected that to happen here today, not in Miami during a scripted ceremonial meeting, but nonetheless, whoever you spoke to in the months and weeks leading up to this meeting was still hoping that might happen, and was saying that they hoped that might happen. And of course, it didn't happen. But something that's interesting, during the Pope's speech throughout, he spoke of Israel very often, and he spoke of Israel as the homeland of the Jewish
Not only did he
people.
speak of it as a homeland, but he said they have a right to a homeland,
Exactly.
as any civil nation according to national law.
That's right. So he spoke of it, and he said that they have a right to have Israel as a homeland. So, I mean, it seems to me that the Pope, you know, is recognizing Israel. We use the two terms sometimes to mean the same thing. They're really different.
I was very impressed on that issue. There were a number of departures that Rabbi Waxman made from his prepared text. And one of them, when he called for the recognition of Israel by the Vatican, and he departed from his text and he said, regardless of any other considerations. And I found that particularly sensitive on his part. He stated his case clearly, but yet at the same time, I think he recognized pragmatically the problem the Pope has, and that is that there are many Christians among the Palestinians, and the issue, at least as I've understood it, has always been that how can he deal with the Christians amongst the Palestinians who are there, and I think that was why he followed his call for a Palestinian homeland immediately upon his remark about Israel.
That's right, Father. And you know, it's been said before, and by Jewish leaders, I've heard it in the weeks leading up to the meeting, and I think after hearing the Pope's speech today, I think we'll hear it more. I think that the Pope recognized Israel today.
Let me tell you this. I think we have a better chance of seeing Israel recognized than we do having priests marry. Do you know, one thing that I find interesting in the whole general approach that we've seen in the talks the Holy Father has been given, especially in these what they call dialogue opportunities, as we discussed yesterday, a lot of people think that dialogue means, okay, I'll ask you a question, you give me an answer right now. And in fact, these questions were answered weeks and months ago and were thought about and reflected upon. But in the long haul, I think that kind of reflective thinking that goes on is probably going to do more to change things, whether we're talking about, practical equality for women, as Father McNulty talked about last night, or the question of the Jewish homeland today. It's very interesting. We're getting, I think, a real layman's education on how the Vatican works when significant things are being talked about, and how do we go about resolving this,
Well, certainly, Father, the kind of things that are being discussed between the Vatican and Jewish leaders are not things that can evoke a quick response.
Exactly.
I mean, the things that Rabbi Waxman was asking for and talking about, you couldn't expect the Pope to stand up and respond to those things. And as Rabbi Schiff pointed out to me last week, the Jewish leaders would rather the Pope take time, as he did in between the meeting in Italy and the meeting today. They would much rather him take the time to think about what the Jewish people have told him and to come up with a response, rather than a quick response would not be a well-thought response, is something that they've said before.
Exactly. I keep wondering if we in America aren't very much afflicted by the syndrome of knee-jerk reaction to practically everything.
And
I
the
think
30-second solution.
And the 30-second solution, exactly. With the result that solution has about as much staying power, as a breeze in Tamiami Park.
What a fine analogy.
Yeah.
The Pope is taking some time now. What you're seeing, he is greeting, or he greeted a lot of the spouses of the Jewish people that were in that meeting. They were allowed to come down from the gallery. They received special invitations in the mail to come and just stand in the lobby and watch the Pope go by. I saw some of those invitations, and some people I spoke to were a little bit disappointed. The invitation sort of intimated that they were going to be a part of the meeting. It was a very formal, grand invitation, and really what it was for these people to just stand in the lobby and get a glimpse of the Pope as he went by, which for some is enough, and for others, they'd like
Who
a little
issued
more.
the invitation, Jerry?
The invitation came collectively from all the Jewish organizations involved in this meeting. They include the Anti-Defamation League of the B'nai B'rith, the American Jewish Committee, the American Jewish Congress, the Rabbinical Association. They sent out invitations. I would say, well, as I said, there was 170 of them. People who are active in Jewish organizations around town got invited. I would
Jerry,
say,
let me ask you a question if I can, and I hope that you won't think this is unfair, because obviously you do not speak for all Jews any more than anybody speaks
Hardly.
for all Jews. But with what you've heard today, the people, and I guess they are primarily the Orthodox people who have been unhappy over the relationship with the Vatican, do you think that any points were made today, or are we right where we always were?
well, and I think, again, this is my personal opinion, I don't think we really, except on the point of Israel, it seemed to me that some very significant things were said about Israel that, in fact, I think you'll hear Jewish leaders saying that the Pope did indeed recognize Israel, and he just needs now to rubber stamp it with diplomatic relations. I think some real progress was made in his speech about Israel. But other than that, I think that rather than, drastically improving relations, it really just clarified how far Jews and Catholics have come, and that's nothing to sneeze at. They really have come, in incredible way. Father Fetcher, I've heard you say it before, we've come further in the past 20 years than we have in the past 2,000, and I think we can take that a step further and say that we've come further in the past couple of months between the Waldheim and the Rome meeting and this than we have in recent years.
And Jerry, I think that's pretty clear here in South Florida how far Catholics and Jews have come in our community in terms of growing closer together. In fact, we have a background report that we'd like to show you now on the relationship between Catholics and Jews in our community.
It is very difficult.